Jada had always found comfort in the rhythm of Poppy's café. The hum of conversations, the soft clinking of coffee cups, and the occasional bursts of laughter from regulars had become the soundtrack to her life. As a 28-year-old waitress, she knew every patron by name, their usual orders, and even their life stories. It was a place of routine, where surprises were rare, and change was even rarer. But that night was different. It started like any other evening. Dim lights casting a warm glow on the wooden booths, the scent of fresh coffee lingering in the air, and the old radio playing smooth jazz in the background. Jada was wiping down the counter when the doorbell chimed. Instinctively, she glanced up, expecting to see one of the regulars. Instead, she froze. Standing in the doorway, as casually as if he belonged there, was none other than Elon Musk, the billionaire, the visionary, the man whose face was splashed across every news site and business magazine. He was the last person anyone expected to walk into a tiny, almost forgotten cafe on the outskirts of town. A hush fell over the room. Conversations halted mid-sentence. Even the old regulars, who usually ignored the outside world, turned their heads in curiosity. A few whispered among themselves, their expressions ranging from awe to skepticism. Jada's heart pounded. She had seen him countless times on TV, watched interviews where he spoke about Mars, AI, and the future of humanity. But now, he was here, right in front of her. For a moment, she wondered if she was imagining it. Maybe she was exhausted. Maybe the long shift was playing tricks on her mind. But then he stepped forward, his presence commanding yet unassuming, and took a seat at a booth by the window. Jada took a deep breath, steadying herself. Whatever the reason for his visit, he was just another customer. She had a job to do. She approached his table, her voice calm despite the storm of nerves raging inside her. "Good evening. What can I get you?" Elon looked up, his blue eyes sharp yet tired. "Just a black coffee, and whatever pie you have left." Jada nodded, coming right up. As she turned away, she felt the weight of the entire cafe's gaze on her. Whispers continued, some excited, others skeptical. She could hear Frank, the most outspoken of the regulars, muttering to another patron. Jada didn't care. She moved behind the counter, pouring his coffee and slicing a piece of warm apple pie. But as she carried the tray back to his table, she couldn't shake the feeling that something big was about to happen, and she was right. Jada placed the coffee and pie in front of Elon with the same warm smile she offered every customer. "Here you go," she said. "Thank you," he replied, his voice softer than she expected. He took a sip of his coffee, his gaze drifting toward the window. His mind was somewhere else, lost in thoughts she couldn't begin to imagine. But the cafe wasn't as quiet as he was. Frank, an old-timer who had been coming to Poppy's for as long as Jada had worked there, leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. His gravelly voice cut through the murmurs. "Ain't you the guy who started OpenAI?" The room tensed. Elon looked up from his coffee, his expression unreadable. "I was involved in the early days, yes," Frank scoffed. "And now you're building your own AI. Sounds like you just want to control everything." A few patrons murmured in agreement. Jada's stomach tightened. She had always found Frank's bluntness entertaining, but now it felt different. Elon met Frank's gaze without flinching. "It's not about control," he said. "It's about making sure AI is built with transparency and aligned with truth." Frank shook his head. "Sounds like a rich man's way of saying, 'I want my own empire.'" The murmurs grew louder. Jada clenched her fists, frustration bubbling inside her. She didn't always agree with everything billionaires did, but something about the way everyone was so sure of their judgment felt unfair. Before she could stop herself, she stepped forward. Maybe he's trying to do it better. Silence fell over the cafe. Jada swallowed hard, feeling every set of eyes on her. Technology moves forward whether we like it or not. The fact that he's trying to make AI more transparent, that's worth something, isn't it? Elon turned to her, a flicker of surprise in his expression. Frank chuckled. You really buy all that? Jada lifted her chin. I think dismissing someone just because they're successful is easy. But actually listening to why they do what they do, that takes effort. A few people looked away, uncomfortable. Others still weren't convinced. But Jada stood her ground, and then her boss stepped out from the back. Jada! Mr. Smith's voice was sharp. He glanced at the customers, then back at her. A word. She followed him behind the counter, her stomach twisting into knots. You know how much our regulars mean to this place, Mr. Smith said. We can't afford to alienate them. I wasn't trying to, he sighed. I think it's best if we part ways. You can finish your shift, but after that. Jada's breath caught in her throat. Fired. For this? Her chest tightened as she forced herself to nod. Understood. The next day, Jada walked into the cafe for the last time. She told herself she wouldn't cry, wouldn't let them see how much it hurt. But as she stepped inside, something felt different. The room was quiet, tense. Then she saw him, Elon Musk, sitting in the same booth as before. Everyone was watching. Even Mr. Smith stood behind the counter, visibly uncomfortable. Elon met her gaze and nodded. Morning. Jada hesitated before approaching his table. Back again? She asked, forcing a light tone. I came to see you. Jada blinked. Me? Elon leaned forward slightly. I appreciated what you said last night, so I made a few calls. My team is always looking for people with integrity. If you're interested, we could use someone like you. Jada's mind spun. Are you offering me a job? Elon nodded. It wouldn't be glamorous, but it'd be steady work, and it might be the start of something bigger. Jada stared at him, trying to process his words. A billionaire had walked into her cafe, and now he was offering her a new life. Her hands trembled as she nodded. Yes. The cafe remained silent as she shook Elon Musk's hand. And just like that, everything changed.